Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to become really good at software testing. Maybe first introduction of who I am. So my name is Ilari Henrik Aegerter. I'm the managing director of a company called House of Test. We provide external test experts to companies and sell our services in general. I'm also the vice president of marketing of the Association for Software Testing, which is an advocacy group for good testing. And because mostly my work consists of not seeing any change, I do work on a computer screen. I also brew beer in order to have something tangible and also to get good friends, because when you brew beer, you suddenly have a lot of good friends. Cool. So this morning I tried to come to the conference, and so as a responsible person I was pretty early in the morning, and so I was looking for this conference called Heisenbug, and then I thought I'd just follow instructions, and I saw this here. It said Holy.js, and then I thought, well, okay, that was the conference yesterday, so I assume it's still the same place. And because there are two directions, I thought, well, every path leads to Rome, every path leads to Heisenbug. Let's just pick one of them, and I walked into the direction left. That was a pretty good choice. Then I had the next selection again. That was fun, because as you can see, I have a scar here on my head, so the glass on the left side was not permeable. I couldn't walk through. And so if my talk doesn't make sense, the picture on the right might give you an indication, because there was this very massive wall, and I, of course, walked into it. Anyway, so I think that's one thing that testers do. They just explore whatever is possible and what you can do. Before I speak, I always give two disclaimers. One of that is this, that I'm a consultant, and replace these signs with the profanity in Russian of your choice. You always need to be aware that if someone stands on the stage and talks about testing or anything, that this is just a transportation of an opinion. It's not the truth. So I have very strong opinions on many things in testing. What I do not claim is that this is in any way the truth, or that I know better than anyone else. Plus, then again, I'm in the consultancy business, so to a certain extent, I'm in the bullshitting business, so that's just part of my job. That also means that you need to question everything that I say here on stage, which then again leads me to what a good tester is. A good tester is someone who questions things, someone who doesn't just believe anything at face value, and is a person who is a compulsive empiricist, someone who really wants to know through experimentation. So that also applies to whatever I'm saying here on stage. You don't have to believe that. Make up your own mind. That's what I want to invite you to do. The second disclaimer is that I am not a world-class tester. I will not regard myself as being a world-class tester. So there are many reasons for that. First of all, my first role is one of being a manager of testers, so I'm not a practitioner. I've been in the business for 13 years now. I started as a tester and test engineer, but very quickly went into the role of being a line manager of testers. Now, that brings a couple of responsibilities with you. One of that is to find good people that can do the work. So I worked a lot on trying to find out what makes a software tester a really good software tester. This is very important because my team needs to be really good. That's what I want. So I better know how to identify people who are very good at testing. Let me start the session with a story of Jesse Alford. I met Jesse a couple of years back in an online course. So there was an online course organized by the Association for Software Testing. It's called Black Box Software Testing. This is a 4-week online course where about 25 people worldwide participate in a hands-on session course that takes a lot of your time, which means that you have to work about 15 to 20 hours every week and interact with other testers. As it happens, Jesse Alford was one of the people who was participating in that course. Now, as you can imagine, in such courses, there are a lot of testers participating. Jesse Alford was not a tester at all. So Jesse Alford worked at the help desk of a company that solved hardware problems. But suddenly he thought, testing might be something interesting, let's have a look into that. In the course, he proved to be a very thoughtful, intelligent person who asked a lot of good questions, and that caught my attention because, of course, at that time I was already a manager, and I just wanted to explore a little bit more of what his motivations are. So what he told me is he was just interested in that. He was curious to know, could software testing be a field that I could become successful? Now, Jesse's background is one of being a difficult child, being thrown out of school, and being mostly self-taught. Still, in my life, I have never met anyone, he was in his early 20s, who has read as much as he had and just had references to everything. He was completely self-taught. He didn't have a university degree at all. I decided to help him in his career, and I connected him to various people in the community. He got mentored by James Bach, who is a big person in testing. Also, James saw his capabilities, and we both tried to find him a first job. Now, that's very difficult if you don't have any university degree, nothing at all. Then it becomes very difficult to get hired anywhere. But because he had a couple of people in his network that really advocated for him, he got hired by Pivotal Labs in California. Now, he knew that he had a lot to learn, and so he became very, very proficient in all technical matters. He started programming, and because he's such a smart guy, he really picked it up very, very much. Today, he is responsible for a technical unit within Pivotal Labs. So he is the go-to guy for all technical matters that are important. Just look at this story of focus and networking and finding really a place in the world of testing. So, when I say world class, what is world class is one of these terms that can mean anything and nothing. So what does world class testing actually mean? There is a saying by Jerry Weinberg, and he has a definition of what a tester is, and I find that quite beautiful. So a tester is a person who knows that things can be different. This is a pretty good start. As testers, we don't take things at face value. We always suspect that things can be different. This is an important trait that you need to keep in your mind, that if someone tells you A, you better go and make an experiment to see whether A is true or not. So you just suspect that maybe that's not true. Maybe people are not telling the right thing, or maybe they're just assuming things, and I want to find out. So I come from a school of testing. It's called context-driven testing. So context-driven testing has a couple of principles that we believe in. Or in other words, it's a cult structure that has the 7 commandments of things that we believe in, although I still think that they make sense. So let's go quickly through that. So the value of any practice depends on its context. So no matter what you do, if you do a specific activity and the context is not right for that, that just doesn't fit. There aren't any recipes that are valuable across all the contexts that you can find yourself in. Number 2 is that there are good practices in context, but there are no best practices. So best practices is one of these terms that has been thrown around, especially by tool vendors. It's best practice to use our tool. It actually doesn't matter what the problem is, it always fits. Now, I find it problematic if you want to adapt your solution, or if you want to adapt the problem to the solution you're providing. I think you should go the other way around. You first understand the problem, and then you provide a solution for that. That makes far more sense. Then, the humanistic part, which is people working together, are the most important part of any project's context. Yes, you, the people, are important. What you're finding yourself in is a system that consists of technology and humans. Software is built by humans, and it's mostly built for humans. So if you want to have a look at the system's boundaries, it includes you, the human. That's a very important part. Then, of course, that's something that I guess you have experienced in the past as well. Projects unfold over time in ways that are often not predictable. Guess what? Plans sometimes don't materialize themselves. They change. You need to adapt to that. That's very interesting. And I'm not referring to the religious form of Agile with Scrum. I'm referring to a specific mindset. Then the product is a solution. If the problem isn't solved, the product doesn't work. Now this applies especially if you have a lot of documentation and you test exactly according to that documentation. Everything is fine according to the documentation, but your users will not like the product. Then you haven't solved, then you haven't done a good job. Then, of course, good software testing is a challenging intellectual process. We have seen a lot in testing where it's been made profane and trivialized, meaning that you can just take any stupid person from the street and sit them in front of a computer, give them a set of test cases, and here you go. Or even worse, you have an interview with a developer, and the developer is not really good at what he or she is doing, so it's not a very good developer, and then you decide to put that person into testing. Now, that's double impact stupid, because first of all, you have a person who's not really good, and you put them in a place where he or she doesn't want to be. So that person doesn't want to test and also doesn't understand programming neither. So how should that ever work? Then the last one, a little bit lengthy, only through judgment and skill, exercise cooperatively throughout the entire project, are we able to do the right things in the right times to effectively test our products. That really means that the cooperation part and the investigation is super important. Good. You know this. Testing is the art of finding out what software can do. Basically, you are verifying whether or not it does what it should do. The second part is also super important and gets disregarded sometimes, and where it fails to do what it claims. Now, I will talk a lot about the red part in my speech and why that is a challenging process and is disregarded very often in projects, and how to mitigate that. Cool. So, Venn diagram. I'm a consultant, so what we consultants do is we draw Venn diagrams. It makes us look smart, and thoughtful, so let's do that. I'll nudge it up a little bit. I add a third one, so now this becomes even more sophisticated. Okay, joke aside, what I'm referring to is this here. When you build software, the easy way to look at it would be, okay, we have a set of requirements and we build according to the requirements, and then we verify the product according to the requirements, and if they match, then everything is fine. Now, this is not fully true, because we are not verifying the requirements, we are verifying the requirements document. Meaning that we verify according to something that has been formalized in written form. This can be text or diagrams or whatever. Now, the described form of software, this is a finite set of instructions. Usually it's written down, it has an n number of pages, it's a finite thing. Now, trouble is that the implementation is something that has no clear boundaries, because you program something that you want, and you also have a lot of side effects that come along with that. Now, this is an infinite space. So the dynamic execution of software is an infinite space. It will give you behavior that you can't foresee. Now, the same applies to what's desired. So this is what actually people want. Just to give you an example, if you have a requirements document, you will not have a chapter that tells you the application shall not throw an exception to the GUI layer. Usually you don't have that. But this is certainly that's something that's desired. Usually you don't describe that in a requirements document, but it's definitely something that you want to have. Now, to make it even more complicated, the desired space is something that you can't fully make explicit. Users of your software, they will have expectations of what the software does, and if you ask them, okay, what is it you want? They will tell you a couple of things, but they won't tell you all, and that's not because they're mean, that's just because it's impossible for people to tap into their implicit expectations. Users have a huge set of implicit expectations. The only way they know that they have these implicit expectations is if the software fails to meet these. At this moment, they recognize, okay, I actually had this desire for the software. Now, that of course becomes interesting in the overlying areas. So the sweet spot, of course, is the one in the middle. So it's described in a document, that's what people want, and it's also implemented, everything fine. So that's the typical pass test. Now, if we have the overlaying area between described and desired, but not implemented, so that's a missing feature. We have desired and implemented. So these are all the things that a developer thought of because he or she is a skilled person implementing in a reasonable way. So they implemented a lot of error handling, things that may not be described in the requirements document. Then there is described and implemented, but not desired. So the product team just made a mistake. There is something weird there. And then, of course, we have the single areas. So it's kind of described, but not desired, not implemented. That's not a big deal because nobody wanted it in the first place. Developers made up their sense. I'm not going to implement that. That's stupid. So that's perfectly cool. Then there's this big area of implemented, which is not described and not desired. So these are all the side effects that can happen in an open system. Now always keep in mind, software is not a closed system. What we have is not something that has clear boundaries. So you will not be able to draw the boundaries and have, say, 100% coverage of something. And I'll come to coverage as well, because that's one of my pet peeves as well, coverage calculations in the sense of percentages. Good. So, where to start? I would propose you to read a lot. So just read a lot of literature. I also recommend you to start with some of the early books on software testing. There's Glenn Fort Myers, The Art of Software Testing. It's been written in the late 70s. This is a highly interesting book to read, and I can really recommend that to you. What I have found when interviewing testers was that when I asked them, so what is your favorite software testing book? They couldn't name one. And I find that that's quite a shame. Just imagine you ask a doctor, so what's your interest most, what's your favorite book on doctoring, on medicine? What's your favorite medicine books? And then they tell you, well, I haven't really read any medicine books because, you know, I actually don't know any medicine books. I don't think you would have that doctor perform open heart surgery on yourself, would you? I don't think so. Good. So pick a couple of books. If you want some concrete recommendation, here are some. I have a huge list of books that are important for software testing. Most of these books are not on software testing. So many of the books that are really valuable for you to become a very, very good tester come from the psychology domain, or they come from the systems thinking domain, or they come from model building, hypothesis, studying like that. So this is super important. If you have not done so yet, I recommend you make your own blog. Write about your daily life as a tester. Now, the main reason to do that is not necessarily that you will have an audience that reads your thinking. It's more that if you start to put your thinking into writing, then it solidifies within you. So your thinking becomes more clear. It helps you to understand your problem better. When you try to describe it in written form, that has an internal effect on yourself, which is extremely valuable and helpful for your own personal development. So here, this is 4 years ago, I've actually written a blog post on the eBay technical blog on what it means to become a world-class tester. So I've been thinking about that problem for quite a while. Then, okay, that's pretty obvious. If you want to become a good juggler of balls, you need to practice your juggling skills. That's quite an obvious thing. Now, testing can be done all the time. If you find yourself in a flight from Moscow to Australia, and there is an entertainment system, then try to test that. This is really fun, because they're usually quite buggy. So it's interesting to do that, just for fun, testings. If you're in an elevator and there is a touch screen, just have a look what you can do with it. It's very interesting. Any gadget that you find, just try to test it yourself. Then, of course, if you're in a job, or if you're out of job, you can use services like UTest, and you can do some testing and also get some money for it. So practice is what makes you a really world-class tester. It's not the theory that will make you world-class. The theory is the foundation that will help you to become really good at what you're doing. So I have already recommended the BBSD courses with my introduction of Jesse's story. These are really good. If you want to know more about that, just come talk to me. So the guy with the slightly shorter beard than on the picture, you can talk to me. Then again, please do understand the difference between what it means to check explicit knowledge and what it means to perform an experiment. Super important. Mostly our testing, and that's true for all automation regression testing, is checking your explicit knowledge about the system's behavior. What you also want to know is, through experiments, what else does it do? Quite important. So this is important to know that there is a difference in the two approaches. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. They're super important in combination. So automation is super important, but there are experiments that will reveal the unknown unknowns. Now these, by definition, you can't codify. You can't automate something that you don't know. You need to be explicit in your algorithms. Then, same thing here. You have the big chance here. There are 500 people here, and I think there are some people on the internet as well watching the presentations. Now, connect yourself here. Try to find what people do. Build your network that you can exchange your thoughts in testing. That will accelerate your skills immediately. And you can tap into a pool of people. You can ask for advice if you're encountering a problem that is difficult. So here what we have is, it's a Slack room called Testers.io. I think it has about 4,000 people in that Slack room, and it's highly active. It also means that if you post something, can you give me some advice on A, B, and C? You will have many, many people giving you some pointers, and some of them might be really useful. Now, of course, this is not completely selfishly. I advise you to join a professional association on testing. Now, the Association for Software Testing really tries to help people becoming better at what they're doing. And we have a lot of case studies of people who have accelerated their career just by becoming a member of our organization and tapping into the pool of things that we can offer. And so they kind of quadrupled their salaries and became really good at what they're doing. I'm sure you have meetups here. Please do go there. It's a more intimate format where you can interact with other testers. It's super cool because if you want to speak at a conference, meetups are a good chance to get some first exposure because the groups are usually smaller, more intimate. It's not just such a scary big stage where you have to stand in front of 500 people. So that becomes much easier for you to get into that. Plus, again, you will build your network. You can't do it alone. So I've spoken about that as well before. So super important to keep in mind that the system you find yourself in is a human technological system. It's not engineering only. It is the human is a part of the system. So you have to take psychological components into consideration when testing. Which also means that even in the project context, you're interacting with people. If you build a good rapport with your developers, that makes it much easier for you to have a bug fixed or to help people to really build good software. If you're sitting somewhere in a test center of excellence, shielded off from all the developers, it is very difficult to build the relationships that are so important for a successful project. I've seen that over and over happening again, that if people don't know themselves personally and haven't been for a beer or for a vodka or for a cup of coffee together, that collaboration becomes far more difficult. So, now, the technical part, absolutely important. You are in the software development business, which means that you should better understand the technology you're doing. So my advice there is become really good at it. It is an important element of testing. So whenever I speak about all these psychological, social things, people sometimes think, oh, he doesn't like automation, he's against automation, but that's very far from the truth. I think it's very important. 2 years ago, I worked at eBay, so I ran the testing team of Europe for eBay. And just guess what? If eBay didn't have very capable regression suites in place, guess what happens if there are 9,000 developers changing code all the time? So this would be a disaster if we don't have that. Yet still, you need to understand the strengths and the weaknesses of automation. So I'm very pro-automation, I'm very against obsession of automation. Just also keep in mind that automation is not a better version of testing. This is very important. It's not that you have manual testing and then automation is the next step you want to walk towards. Automation can be helpful in acting as a safety net. It's a super important element in testing. Yet it can provide you the question of, okay, what else does the software do that might be interesting? At the end of the day, you as a tester, you're in the information delivery business. That's what you do. You deliver information that can be valuable for the stakeholders in the project. Now use your tool that is helpful for that. Sometimes conducting an experiment is far more important than just building up your regression suite. So don't fall in love with your automation tools. Use them wisely where appropriate. It's also sometimes, there's the thing, yes, if you have automation that will save you time, not necessarily, because you still need to maintain your automation. Automation, by definition, is a software development project. Software needs care and attention. It needs maintenance. That's very important. Good. Also keep in mind that sense-making is a human property. So the question, okay, does this make sense? A computer can't give you the answer to that. To give you an easy example, one morning you come into your company, your regression suites, 10,000 tests, they all failed. Huh? Does that mean that your project is in deep trouble and you should stop and do everything? No, because you as a human, your first suspicion is, maybe the test environment was down. And then you go investigate and see, okay, that makes sense, fine, no problem at all. So computers can take away this task. This is a human property, and you need to combine that. Also keep in mind that the building of automation, you need to analyze your system. You need to make decisions on, okay, what exactly do we automate? These are all human activities. You can't automate them away. You can't just push a button, build me a regression suite that is really, really good. That's not computable for a computer. This should come as obvious as well. If you have an adversarial relationship to your developers, that's not very helpful. So build your relationship with the development team and become really part of that team. So I will talk a little bit about complexity right now. So complex systems are systems where there is a not clear causal relationship. So complexity is something where if you do the same thing to a different time, the outcome might be different. And that's what software is. I can highly recommend to have a look at Dave Snowden's Kinefin model. I think it has a very high level of applicability in software testing and also software engineering. Now, the trouble that we got ourselves in software engineering is that whenever something new comes into the world, humanity looks at past things and tries to take methods and approaches from past things. So what happened with software engineering? People thought, well, this is a kind of a sophisticated form of a factory that produces something. And you certainly have heard this kind of development factories, test factories. So you take the naming from the industrial age and you just apply it to something else. Now, if you build soup cans or if you have cans that are filled with borscht, then this is a repeatable process. It's the same thing you do over and over again. Meaning that this is a very highly predictable system. You know exactly what's going to happen. If you do the same thing again, the same thing will happen. Now, what we have here, so let's have a quick look into the Kinefin model. So basically, Dave Snowden separates the system vertically into ordered and linear systems, and on the left, complex nonlinear systems. And what we have on the right are obvious things. I'll give you an example. If you calculate 2 plus 2, this belongs into the obvious domains of things. You don't have to analyze the problem deeply. You just have to apply a specific set of algorithms. It's called addition, and then your result will be 4 on a base 10 system, giving a couple of caveats there. Then we have complicated systems. So these are the ones that are still predictable, which means that they follow a finite set of rules, and the outcome will be the same thing over and over again. Say a complicated endeavor is building a skyscraper. So building a skyscraper, you have a finite set of physical laws that apply. Then you have a couple of engineering practices that you can apply, and then you can build a skyscraper. So that is a problem that's solvable through analysis. Now, on the left side, what we have there are complex nonlinear systems. These are the ones where the system behaves differently. So, quite interestingly, the name of this conference is called Heisenbug. So, are you aware of the concept of Heisenbug and what it is? So, these are these bugs where you perform a test. Then the test fails. Then you think, okay, let's have a look, let's perform it again. Then it passes. Then you think, okay, that's weird. Okay, let's narrow it down a bit. Let's perform it again. Then it fails 3 times, it passes 2 times, and then it fails forever. But then when you want to demonstrate it to your manager, of course it passes. So you know this concept of Heisenbugs. Now, why is that the case? That's why software development is belonging into the complex nonlinear domain. That means analysis won't bring you that far. It can be helpful, but it's not all of the game. What you need to do in complex systems is perform a set of parallel experiments and then make sense of the outcome of these, and based on the outcome, decide what you do next. So you can see there that you can't fully automate testing. 100% automation doesn't make sense on so many levels. So coverage also is something that is not, you're not covering the product, you're covering a model representation of a product. So say if you have 100% line coverage, you refer this coverage to the model of lines of code. But now software is not a static thing, software is a dynamic thing that also interacts with third-party elements, and there's also a human doing mistakes or trying to be harmful to the system. This is not fully controllable. It's not an ordered system that behaves in a way that's fully predictable. Good. One useful heuristic. Maybe just a little introduction into heuristics. There are 2 different systems. One is algorithmic. Algorithms are a set of instructions that you can follow that will lead to the same outcome. Heuristics are a kind of rule of thumb that you apply. They are very, very quick, but sometimes they don't work. One heuristic that you apply when you cross the road is you look to the left in Russia, to the right in England, and if there is a truck approaching, the one thing you don't do is measure the distance with a laser beam and then make your calculations of how long does the truck take to be here, and can I cross that with the function of time that it needs to cross the road. You don't do that. It's going to look at, sounds good, and then you cross the road. Mostly that works. It has worked 100% of the times for all of you here, because otherwise you would be dead. But sometimes people get killed by trucks. So this is a heuristic applied. It's very useful. Mostly it works. Sometimes it doesn't. So heuristics are quick and useful rules that are not 100% correct. So, one heuristic, if something is quick and easy, it's probably snake oil. You know that from tool vendors that tell you, okay, so my tool will solve all your problems and bring peace to humanity. So, that is a claim that probably isn't true, because it's one of these quick and easy things. That also means that tools are not the major component of solving your problems. Tools can help you. I really like tools, I like Jira. I actually like Jira. Jira is pretty cool sometimes, and sometimes it's not useful. For some problems, it's not a good thing. Say if I work with a developer directly and we sit on the same table, I probably don't use a bug tracking tool. I just talk to the developer and let's have it fixed very quickly. So again, tools can be helpful in some contexts, and sometimes they're not. Now this comes along with snake oil. Especially managers are really vulnerable to that, and I know that because I've been a manager for so long. What's really good is if a person can take away your anxiety. So we managers, we are really, we're a fearful, scared little piece of humanity. We are scared of everything because we're responsible. And so if someone comes along and gives us this certainty, look, this tool will solve your problems, we think, that's very nice. Now my problems will be gone. So we are really vulnerable to things like that. Keep also in mind that test cases are not testing itself. Now, who is a developer here who writes production code in here? Okay, how many development cases do you have that you then execute into code? None? What? I mean, that's unstructured development. Why don't you write them as development cases? Who is a manager in here? Line manager. So how many management cases do you perform each day? Okay, who's a parent? How many parenting cases do you perform on your children? Okay, so why do we have this in testing, that we suddenly need to have these test cases, these petrified representations of an ancient level of knowledge from the past that we then execute, step-by-step instructions? Very, very bad. It also has a psychological effect that task compliance becomes more important than observational broadness. So what does that mean? You're more focused on reading on what the hell do I need to do here, and I really don't want to mess it up. And at the same time, your application crashes because it's not in a test case, you don't report it. I've seen cases where companies have rejected bug reports because they were not found with the test case. That's unstructured testing. Yes, there was a meltdown in an X-ray machine, but it was not in the test case, so it's not a bug. So it doesn't make sense to me at all. Cool. How much time do we have? Another minute? 20 minutes. Okay, cool. Now, whatever you do in testing, apply your own judgment. So why is that so important? Question here, who has studied software testing on a university level? Who has a master's in software testing? No one? That's weird. Yeah, so you see, that exactly is the problem. So what we don't have is a structured university level course in testing, which means that you're on your own in testing, basically. Now, of course, many of you have studied software engineering, and that is a super important part of your tool set in testing. Very, very important to have that. But software testing, you can't study that, so you have to do it yourself. Now, of course, the handling of automation tools, that's something that your software engineering degree will give you a tool set to apply. But in testing, there are so many other elements in testing: model building, analysis, critical thinking, trying to find variations. All these are capabilities that you need to build yourself. Now, one book that I really want to recommend to you is Paul Feyerabend's Against Method. Now, Paul Feyerabend had a look at the scientific method. So, you know the scientific method, you build a hypothesis, then you verify your hypothesis, and if it is verified, then it becomes a theory, right? A straightforward process, scientific process. Now, that's not what they have found, because the more important question is, okay, how do you come up with good hypotheses? How do you find a good hypothesis? And there it becomes really messy, because what often happens is that the good hypothesis have happened at 3 o'clock in the morning when someone was really, really drunk. That's when good hypotheses happen. Okay, that's interesting. And then if they haven't forgotten that the next morning, they might just do something, and the experiment might not find the first solution, but because they're compulsive, obsessive people, they just try on, and it's more a meandering process of finding insight. Same applies to testing. There isn't a standard methodology in testing that you can just apply. That doesn't make sense. So there are a lot of certifications out there. And what they insinuate, okay, so this is the set of things that you need to do, and then you will be fine. But that's not how software testing works. I would bet a lot of money that most of the interesting bugs that you have found in your professional career didn't happen with a test case or didn't happen with something, but because you just had this insight, let's try this, let's see what happens, and then boom, the whole machine blew up. That's probably what you have found. Cool. So, what I want to recommend are these things. So, practice many skills. Don't only focus on software engineering practices, but the same on the psychological level. The second one I find very important as an accelerator of your professional career is the connection to other testers. If you connect to other testers, you will become more powerful. That's why superheroes often work in teams, so you know that. Have a deep understanding that testing is a social activity. Same thing is for a bug. Can you give me an algorithmic definition of what a bug is? You can't, because a bug is a social construct. A bug is what people say a bug is. You have all been there. So you have raised the bug, and then people say, well, yeah, that might be, but we won't fix it. At the end of the day, any bug fixing is a business decision. It's not something where you can apply a rule set. It's human making sense of that and then deciding on that. There are so many social aspects in testing that are important. Number 4, become technically proficient. Very important. I don't think in 10 years there will be testers around who haven't got a deep understanding of the technology they work with. So if you can't read code or if you can't write code, then today might be a good starting day to get yourself proficient in that. And it will take a while because it's something that is hard to learn. Just coding a little application for yourself is not the same thing as working in a multinational corporation building big systems. So one is hacking and the other one is software engineering. There are two different things. You can find a lot about Dave Snowden and complexity thinking on the internet. Browse through that stuff and see whether or not this could be applicable for what you find. And number 6, a good friend of mine, he has an explicit not to-do list. So I guess you all have kind of your to-do lists. So these are the things that make you miserable at the end of the day because you have only done 50%. Now my friend, he has a not to-do list. He has explicitly listed a couple of things that these are the things I don't do. I don't do these. So sometimes a good idea to think about, okay, what is really useful and what is not, and stay clear of the not so useful areas. And then number 7, yes, testing is such an interesting field to be in, so just enjoy your ride. And with that, I wish you good luck with your journey. Let's have a little discussion here. So please disagree with me, and let's have your question. Thank you.
Вопросы? Задаем вопросы, желательно на английском языке. Поднимайте руку, и к вам подбежит очень бодрый помощник. Не стесняемся.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's just introduce myself. Andrew Gittelson, Grid Dynamics. My question is, what is your recommendation for QA team lead? You said a lot about engineering stuff, but what is recommendation for leading of QAs?
So maybe keep the microphone. I might have a question for you as well. So are you a team lead responsible for testers as a line manager, or is it project related?
So.
So it's a bit of both?
Yeah.
Okay, so am I assuming correctly that you're probably not doing testing yourself a lot anymore? I think keep it for a while.
Sorry, yeah. Actually, as for now, I'm just a tech lead. I'm not a real team lead, so I'm just trying to improve myself to become a team lead.
Yes.
And I trying to understand what should I do better to be a team lead, not in terms of real testing, I mean.
Right. Okay, so what I can recommend to you, first of all, becoming a team lead makes your job 100% different. You're in a completely different job. You're in the job of making people feel comfortable in what they're doing and giving them the assurance that their development, their self-development is on the right track, and supporting them like hell doing that, plus injecting a lot of trust into your people to do the right thing. So what I recommend to you is to study the history of management from the very start with scientific management, which is not applicable anymore, and going on with more modern versions of how to bring people forward. Also, it's conflict talks have a lot of study into conflict talks. How do you talk to someone who is not performing in a way that makes that people perform again, not to make them feel bad? So the job of a manager is not to tell people what they are doing, because people generally do whatever they want. As a manager, you don't have control over your people. And managers who have the illusion that they do, well, they become alcoholic and depressed and everything, because it just doesn't work. That's not what happens. What you want to achieve is that your people want themselves to do what you want. And there's no recipe book in that. But I think there are a couple of elements that will help you. First of all, one is trust. Shield them off against bullshit from above. Take all the crap and divert all the praise to your team. So these are good elements that will make your team performant. And have brutal honesty. So if something good happens, let the people know that they did well. If something bad happens, talk about it immediately. Don't wait until the end of the year for the year-end performance management. Yeah, you hear that my opinion on that is not very great. If something bad happens, address it directly and support them like hell. And never take any credit for anything. Give all the credit to your team, and if something goes bad, you take all the responsibility. So these are a couple of heuristics that will help you to become a good team lead.
Sorry, and any book you recommend for this stuff?
Well, it's Opelo's Management 3.0 is a good start. Then what I would also recommend you is Jerry Weinberg's Becoming a Technical Leader. If you come to me later on, then I will have a couple of more books in my head. But these two are a good starting point. Yeah.
В серединке есть вопрос. Вон там, я вижу руку.
Hello, thank you for your presentation, very motivational. I have a question. What do you think about certification in software testing? You know, like ISTQB and some others?
I think it's the biggest scam on the planet. I think this is absolutely the most useless piece of crap that is out there. And by saying that, I try to find nice words. No, the trouble in that is that it's one of the instruments of kind of making software testing a profane endeavor, where it's only important that you memorize a couple of terms. Now, it's kind of my background is both in sociology, linguistics, and software engineering. So I'm a linguist as well. I know how language works, and having an institute trying to control language is a stupid thing. So you can watch that in France. Académie Française tries to regulate how French works. The problem there is just people don't give a shit. Now, I've heard that you in Russia, you have this profanity language, mat, right? Yeah? All right. I think many governments have tried to control that. Were they successful in doing that? No, of course not, because language is something that you can't control. Plus, again, it's just imagine the same thing. Let's transport the multiple choice questionnaire to other professions. Say pilots. Pilots go to a 3-day course, and then they have 26 multiple choice questions. One is, how many wings are there on a plane? And then you have to cross one answer. And then you let them fly a 777? Does that make any sense? It's also quite interesting that they ask for a truth in their questionnaire, as if in humanity there are many questions that have only one true answer. Many things are so contextual, and outside of pure mathematics, there are no questions that have one right answer. And that is a big thing. Now, the reason why it's around is these people have, they're con artists that have made believe HRs and non-testing people to think that this is a good thing to have, and ask HRs to screen CVs if there is this certificate available. So I stop here because I could just go on, but I think it makes a lot of money for many people. Okay, but so do arms and drugs. Yeah. Okay, so I'll stop here.
The last question is here.
Hi, I'm Edward from Ilama. Thank you for your speech and your answers to previous questions. My question is about how your speech about testing relates to quality assurance. Mm-hmm. Like we at least in Russia community, we differentiate these two phenomena. How does your speech relates to, well, quality assurance process in general? Thank you.
Okay, so this is multifaceted. So first of all, assurance is, as a word that conveys certainty. Now, what I don't believe in is that software is something where you can produce certainty. So the concept of assuring quality actually comes out of the production environment. It comes from factories and from the industrial age, where you made the can of borscht and you just wanted to make it better and better, and you refined it. And where you had a set of rules that you applied that guaranteed that this soup is still edible when it lands on the plate of someone who is hungry. Now, in software testing, this is not possible because, again, it's not a ordered system. So the assurance part is not really easy to do. What quality assurance departments often do, so they are the process people that provide templates, that do these things. I'm neutral towards that. This can be helpful sometimes and sometimes it is not. But people should not have the illusion that you can assure quality in software. Now, very often testing departments are called QA. As long as it's clarified, I'm relaxed with that. So if people say, okay, we are QA and we test the software and we try to find bugs, then I'm fine. If they want to call themselves QA, that's fine. Maybe it's quality assistance, maybe it's something else. Now for me, testing is deeply an activity that yields information. So testing is an information delivery vehicle. That's what it does. It provides information. Quality assurance can be something on the process side that can be helpful. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
That's it. I believe we are almost finished.
Just back there.
No. We don't have enough time because we are running out of this time slot. So thank you, Ilari. Давайте поблагодарим.
Okay.